Did you know that Return of the Jedi actually ruined Star Wars Stormtrooper helmets? Now, let me explain. My name is Mike, I am the Weird Pigeon of Weird Pigeon Productions, and today we're going to be going over the history of the Stormtrooper helmet and how Return of the Jedi actually kind of ruined them. The original Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, featured about 50 stunt Stormtrooper helmets and 6 hero helmets. But by the time of Return of the Jedi, a lot of these helmets were in really poor condition, and they also needed a ton more helmets. To make these additional 50 to 60 helmets, they actually used the original mold from A New Hope. However, when making these helmets, during the process, the mold actually collapsed, causing the Return of the Jedi helmets to appear a little thinner and taller because they've been warped due to the actual mold collapsing. Really, to explain all of this, I kind of need to go back to the very beginning of the Stormtrooper helmet and also explain that through the years, the Stormtrooper helmet has actually changed quite a bit from the original New Hope version. To help explain all of this, I've got my Star Wars Hasbro Black Series Stormtrooper helmet. In this video, I'm going to use this helmet to kind of explain some of the changes and issues with the helmets in the original trilogy. So before A New Hope came out, during production, the first ever mold for Stormtrooper helmets was handmade from clay. They didn't have computers or computerized machines to perfectly make these helmets, so the actual mold itself was a little bit warped and not entirely symmetrical. Also, all of these helmets were made from a process called vacuum forming, which is different from the process that they used to make Darth Vader's helmet and even Boba Fett's helmet, which are actually made of fiberglass. These are made out of like a really cheap plastic. And once the pieces for the helmet were vacuum formed, which there were actually 4 different pieces, there was a face piece, a head piece that also was a part of the back as well, and then one piece for the ear on this side and one piece for the ear on this side. And all of it was held together by 2 Phillips head screws that they actually drilled into the earpieces that held this side of the helmet together and this side of the helmet together. Kind of crazy, and in some scenes you can actually see the Phillips head screws in the earpieces holding the helmet together. I'll show you a little bit more of that later on. And George Lucas himself actually ordered 50 stunt Stormtrooper helmets that weren't as detailed. He also commissioned 6 hero helmets. Now, a hero helmet or a hero prop is actually a prop that is a little more detailed than your regular prop and is used for close-ups. Sometimes it's called a close-up prop. Now, the 50 stunt helmets that were made from a much cheaper process and cheaper plastic than the 6 hero helmets. The plastic was actually like this khaki-colored plastic that was used to make fish ponds, kind of like what you'd see at Walmart, like the plastic fish pond liners that you put like goldfish and things like that in your backyard. The company that made Stormtrooper helmets and armor actually made regular supplies for outdoors. They made things like canoes and kayaks and plastic fish ponds. And because the stunt helmets were made from this khaki-colored fish pond plastic, they had to be painted white, of course. But for some reason, the white paint really didn't adhere to this cheap plastic. So a lot of the helmets that have survived that were stunt helmets are covered in cracks and chips where you can actually see through the white paint to the khaki-colored plastic underneath. Also, all of the brows on the stunt helmets were weirdly deformed and kind of bowed upwards. In a lot of these pictures, you'll see that instead of the brow being perfectly straight, it's kind of arched in weird ways just because they were cheaply and quickly made. Another thing is that the actual frown on these helmets varied, and a lot of them came all the way to the very edge, unlike this replica here. Another interesting thing is that each helmet varied in the number of teeth that were on the frown, because these teeth were essentially hand cut out of the plastic once it had been molded and formed. Another interesting detail about these helmets is that a lot of the details were hand painted onto the helmets. And on some helmets, these little blue stripes that are on this sort of cheek respirator portion of the helmet weren't even painted. Now, as for the hero helmets, they were a much higher quality. They were made from a different type of plastic. They were still vacuum formed, but they were made from ABS instead of the other type of plastic that was used for the stunt helmets. Now, the ABS plastic was actually white, so these helmets didn't need to be painted. Now, this isn't the only difference between the stunt helmets and the hero helmets. A big difference is the fact that the hero helmets have a much smaller frown. The frown usually ends right about here. And in some of these shots and photos, you'll see that there is a big difference between the hero helmet frown and the stunt helmet frown. And the lenses inside the eyes had this almost like curve to them, kind of like a fishbowl or like goggles, whereas the stunt helmets were just a flat lens, much like this replica here. Now, when A New Hope was a massive success, people loved it, it was time to make another movie, Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back. And George Lucas actually decided to reuse the Stormtrooper helmets and armor from the previous movie on Empire Strikes Back. So what they did is they took all the helmets and they went ahead and repainted all the helmets, touching them up where the paint had chipped or cracked, especially the stunt helmets, since, again, the paint didn't really adhere to them like it should. And they actually went over all of the hand-painted details and replaced them with vinyl stickers. One huge notable difference, though, between the A New Hope helmets and the Empire Strikes Back helmets is they actually repainted the frown completely black. There was no gray little teeth like on this one, like you see in A New Hope. All of them had black teeth, and the area around the frown was also painted black as well. One small little detail to mention is the actual eye sockets were widened just slightly. Not sure why, but it probably had something to do with the fact that people really couldn't see very well out of these helmets, much like Luke says in New Hope. Even though they repainted the helmets, in some shots you can actually see small chips underneath where they painted over the helmet with white. You can also see in this image where the two screws are, holding the whole helmet together, which to me is just crazy. So once Return of the Jedi rolled around, it was time to make all new helmets. In Empire Strikes Back, they really only reused about 14 Stormtrooper costumes because they didn't really need as many Stormtroopers for this movie. So it was time to crack out the original mold used in New Hope and make entirely new sets of Stormtrooper armor and helmets. But again, like I said before, when they made these helmets, the mold actually collapsed, causing the helmets to look a lot thinner and taller, kind of ruining the look of Stormtroopers. Another thing that they continued on from Empire Strikes Back is they actually, again, kept to the black painted frown. And what's interesting about these helmets is instead of the frown coming to a point, like it does on this helmet and all the helmets before, all of the frowns on the Return of the Jedi helmet either came to a rounded edge or came to a squared off edge. But another thing that they continued on from Empire Strikes Back is, again, all of the details, instead of being hand painted, they were just put on with vinyl stickers. Another really interesting fact about the Return of the Jedi helmets is that these helmets and armor were also used for the special edition changes. So any Stormtroopers you see in the special editions, whether they're actual costumes or they were done digitally, are using the Return of the Jedi style Stormtrooper armor. Now, you may be wondering, okay, so what's different about the new Disney Star Wars movie Stormtrooper helmets, like Rogue One, The Mandalorian, Solo, Obi-Wan Kenobi? Well, I'll actually get into this a little more in a different video, but in a lot of ways they have fixed Stormtrooper helmets and made them better than they have actually ever been. Again, like I said before, the original mold was handmade out of clay. They didn't have any computers or machines that could make these things perfectly symmetrical. So even the best Stormtrooper helmet was not perfect. It was still warped, it wasn't symmetrical, there were a lot of issues with it. So what do you think of all these changes to the Stormtrooper helmet throughout the years? It's pretty crazy just how many types of helmets were made and how with every movie they changed slightly, whether it's because of a creative decision or by mistake, like what you see in Return of the Jedi. And do you think Return of the Jedi really ruined Stormtrooper helmets? Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Also, what do you think these changes kind of do for the story of Star Wars? Star Wars is a massive fictional universe, and you want some kind of consistency through the helmets. I guess you could explain it by saying that as the war went on, the Stormtrooper helmet changed, but I'll get more into that when I talk about Rogue One and The Mandalorian, because they did some interesting things with those helmets that are a little bit inconsistent with the changes that you see through the original trilogy. So guys, this video took a ton of research to make and a ton of time to create. So if you enjoyed it, please leave a like. Also, I have a bunch of links down in the description where I got my information from. There's tons more information out there. So if you're interested in finding out even more about Stormtrooper helmets, even some of the Stormtrooper helmets that have survived today from the original trilogy, I highly recommend you check out those articles. Also, I'd really appreciate it if you comment letting me know what you thought of the video. I love learning and talking about the behind the scenes of these movies, especially the original trilogies, since so much of what they did was low budget. They really had to scrap things together and get creative. So if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, please be sure to subscribe. So that's it for this video, guys, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.